This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
5 HOP principles lifting us higher, learning without blame, fueling our fire. Together we grow, together we thrive, keeping operational excellence alive.
Welcome to Season 7 and the 141st episode of the podcast show, HOP Into Action. I am your host, Brent Sutton from Learning Teams Inc. I recently read a series of human resources papers on what is considered one of the most important skills for the workforce moving forward. Guess what? Adaptability skills are considered paramount and a top skill of the moment for workers in today's professional landscape, driven by rapid advancements in automation, AI, and shifting non-linear career paths. One article stated that 60% of employers believe adaptability has become more important this decade than in the past, with many ranking it as a critical soft skill or power skill for long-term career success and resilience. The same article stated that 63% of CEOs report difficulty finding talent with the ability to adapt to business requirements. Yet adaptability is not just about changing. It is a blend of several skills, including cognitive flexibility, which is being able to adjust thinking to suit new situations, problem solving, and rapid learning. Emotional resilience, which is maintaining a positive attitude and managing stress during disruptions, setbacks, or crises. Proactive learning, which is actively seeking new skills and viewing challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. And interpersonal adaptability, where collaborating effectively across changing team structures and cultures. These articles went on to talk about how to cultivate adaptability with approaches like get out of your comfort zone, challenge yourself with new routines, tools, or responsibilities, seek feedback, regularly ask for constructive criticism to identify blind spots, adopt a what's next mindset, focus on future possibilities rather than clinging to the status quo, learn to unlearn, be willing to let go of methods that worked yesterday but are no longer efficient today. Yet, when workers are being asked to be adaptable in changing and demanding environments, it appears that they are a treasured asset, and the solution, when work is going well, then a liability, and the cause of the problem when work goes wrong. How does this disconnect between operations, which wants to embrace change, and safety, where we want compliance with the plan and procedure, go so wrong? And are we sending mixed messages to workers and leaders? Today, we're going to look at the architecture of everyday work. If you've spent any time in operations, management, or safety, you know a fundamental truth. Work is rarely performed exactly as it is designed. We believe safe and effective performance comes from adherence to a plan or procedure, but the reality? Workers do not operate in perfectly stable environments. They work in dynamic settings, shaped by variability, competing goals, limited resources, and imperfect procedures. In these complex environments, humans constantly adjust and workers adapt because they must make the job work under the actual conditions they face, not the idealized conditions others imagine they have. Yet there is a large body of research across safety science, resilience engineering, human factors, ergonomics, and organization studies has converged on a singular foundational truth. Human adaptation at work is both normal and entirely necessary. It is acknowledgement that in complex environments, adaptation is not an occasional rebellious departure from the norm. It is part of the norm itself. Workers adapt because real work is highly variable, Resources are finite, procedures are inherently incomplete, and people must make the job work under the actual conditions they face, not the idealized conditions others imagine they have. One of the clearest and most vital explanations for why workers must adapt comes from the distinction between work as imagined and work as done. Work as imagined refers to how work is described, prescribed, planned, or assumed by designers, procedure writers, managers, and regulators. It is the official version of the job, the idealized procedure, the sanitized training module, the static risk assessment, and the manager's expectation of how a task will unfold. Work as done, by contrast, refers to how work is actually carried out under real conditions by the human beings executing it. Research in systems thinking and resilience engineering emphasizes that these two versions of work are never fully identical. This persistent gap exists because formal representations of work are abstractions. Procedures and plans cannot possibly contain all the granular detail, variability, necessary judgment, and improvisation involved in actual performance. Schedules inherently assume stable sequencing, and risk assessments often assume known hazards with perfectly functioning controls. But real operations involve simultaneous demands, degraded equipment, missing information, staffing fluctuations, tool issues, environmental changes, and emerging constraints that were not, and often could not be, fully anticipated by the system's designers. This does not mean procedures are useless. It means they are incomplete by nature. The more dynamic, high pressure, or complex the work environment, the more likely it is that written procedures alone cannot determine safe action. What ultimately closes the gap between the formal design of work and its practical, successful accomplishment is human performance in context. A foundational idea in Safety 2 and resilience engineering is that successful work depends entirely on people's ability to adjust their performance in response to changing conditions. Workers rarely encounter identical situations from one moment to the next. They are constantly compensating for small mismatches, recovering from disturbances, and aligning their actions with unfolding realities. This represents a major shift from older organisational views that focused primarily on deviations, errors, and non-compliance. In the Safety 2 framing, it is not enough for an organisation to only ask why things go wrong. Organisations must also deeply study how things normally go right, because the exact same human capacity to adjust underlies both successful outcomes and occasional failures. Most of the time, these adjustments help create acceptable outcomes and keep the system functioning. Occasionally, under different conditions, these similar adjustments contribute to adverse events. Because variability is inevitable and often beneficial, adaptation should not be treated as an anomaly requiring immediate suspicion or disciplinary action. In many systems, human adaptation is the core mechanism by which work remains productive, safe enough, timely, and coordinated. If we eliminate adjustment, which is impossible, many organisations would immediately struggle to function at all. A classic example of this, when unions ask their union members to work to rule. They know that following every job to the letter of the law will choke production. So, why do workers adjust? Eric Holnagel provides a brilliant explanation called the efficiency thoroughness trade-off, or the ETTO principle. The ETTO principle states that people and organisations cannot maximise both efficiency and thoroughness at the same time under real-world constraints. Time, energy, attention, and staffing are all finite resources. When time is compressed or production demands are intense, work naturally and inevitably tilts toward efficiency. This brings us to a concept called local rationality. Local rationality dictates that people's decisions and actions make perfect sense to them at the time, given what they know, what they are trying to achieve, and the constraints they perceive in that moment. When a manager or frontline leader said that the worker took a shortcut or a workaround, the workers aren't usually being careless. They are acting rationally based on the immediate situation whilst attempting to satisfy competing demands. Now, traditionally in safety science, we've called these adjustments human adaptations, but we need to shift our language if we want to effectively understand and improve the systems we operate. While the word adaptation is not factually wrong, in many workplaces it carries hidden baggage. The term adaptation can subtly imply that a worker independently decided to change a method, which quietly keeps the focus and the blame on the individual. In traditional environments, terms like shortcut, workaround, non-compliance, or deviation already carry a heavy judgment, implying the worker simply stepped away from the right path due to a behavioural defect. By shifting the language and using the word responses, we fundamentally change the narrative. Adaptation suggests that people changed, while response highlights that the conditions of the work environment mattered. Using the term response acknowledges that workers are actively answering the conditions, constraints, conflicting goals, and practical pressures present in the system. It suggests that what people did was not an act of random rebellion or personal weakness, but a necessary answer to real issues: demand, variability, poor design, awkward layout, repeated jams, time pressure, missing tools, or heavy workload. So instead of saying the operator adapted the process, leaders should say the operator responded to repeated interruptions in the process. Instead of the team adapted the lockout procedure, we should say the team responded to the practical difficulty of the lockout method. This wording makes the system visible. It shifts the focus away from what was wrong with the person and points inquiry directly toward what was present in the situation. It moves the story from what is wrong with the person to what was present in the situation.
We are taking a break to share a message with you. Maybe you've heard the promises of AI and wondered, can I trust it with safety, with quality, with my data? I get it. So let me show you a real example. With Plod.ai Note-Taker and HOP Copilot's field-based work insights, you can capture what's happening on the ground, worker conversations, the everyday doesn't make sense, dangerous, difficult, and different moments. These aren't polished reports. They're real voices, real insights. For instance, a team doing shift handover uses a Plod Note device. The note-taker agent listens in, captures the conversations, transcribes them, and then summarizes them under the 4Ds and 4Ls framework. It might pick up that someone said, "We didn't have enough lighting in the stairwell. We tripped over hose reels. The emergency latch isn't clear." Those get categorized. Dumb, dangerous, difficult, different. Learnings and potential improvements are surfaced. And yes, while this is AI-powered, human judgment remains central. You review, you validate, you decide. Ethical AI designed so people are always in control. On top of that, HOP Copilot agents run on Microsoft 365 Copilot, which keeps your data secure. User prompts and responses are protected. None of your internal data is used to train public models. So, for those skeptical of AI wondering if it's hype or risk, this one turns voice into value. If you care about safety, clarity, and learning, HOP Copilot with Plod agents gives you tools like the Learning from Work Insights agent, critical control insights, work design, and error trap analysis. Here's what you can do. Visit hopcopilot.com. Explore the Plod note-taker agents. Try the free version of the Event Learning Storyboard, or book a chat with us about bringing the full suite into your team. Let's build safer, smarter work together, where AI serves humans, not the other way around. Now back to the podcast.
So what do these responses look like on a granular level? This is really important, and here at Learning Teams Inc., we have been fortunate to listen to many thousands of worker stories through our 4Ds app, our work design agents for Plod Note Taker, and our Microsoft M365 HOP Copilot agents. We have seen these responses show patterns into three main clusters: capacity responses, efficiency responses, and everyday work responses. Let us explore each group. Let us start with capacity responses. These are risk-conscious responses to work in which workers have faced uncertainty in performing the work and have pulled it back into a safer state. For example, with capacity responses, it could have been a recovery response, where the workers slow down, add extra checks, or ask for help when something feels off or unexpected conditions arise. Then there are coordination responses, where workers rely on informal signals, verbal cues, or the tacit knowledge of experienced peers, rather than formal systems to ensure tasks are coordinated safely. Then we have double-checking responses, where workers add an extra check with a co-worker or double-check something before starting. And proactive inspection responses, where workers inspect equipment earlier than required or implement proactive hazard identification measures. And finally, extra precaution responses, where workers deliberately take an extra precaution when conditions feel uncertain or risky. The next grouping is efficiency responses. These are optimization strategies workers use to help workflow better by managing time, effort, and competing demands while maintaining safety, such as time-saving responses, where workers shorten, skip, or combine steps to keep work moving under production pressures. Effort-reducing responses, where workers change a task to reduce physical strain, awkwardness, walking, heavy lifting, or frustration caused by awkward layouts. Then sequence or reordering responses, where workers change the sequence of tasks to avoid wasted time, minimize travel, or match the real workflow. We also have parallel processing responses, where workers prepare materials, set up the next step, or inspect equipment for subsequent tasks while waiting on process time. And finally, workflow coordination responses, where teams organize work and coordinate activities to optimize workflow and reduce delays or congestion. The final group is everyday work responses. Over time, as teams face recurring demands, these repeat adaptations to the work become normalized standard practice across the work group. We have seen these occur where workers use procedures or permits more lightly than intended for repetitive tasks to reduce system friction, shifting protection onto their own memory and skill, which we call rule-light responses, then risk normalizing responses, where workers get used to exposure that initially felt unusual or hazardous, quietly moving the boundary of acceptable performance so that greater exposure feels normal. We also have task-fitting responses, where workers do part of the task in a way that fits the actual job better than the written instruction. Also, alternative method responses, where teams use alternative tools or techniques that are known locally to work well. Then, informal protocol responses, where workers establish informal communication protocols or add an informal coordination step with others. And finally, pre-work responses, where workers' performance tasks pre-inspect equipment before the formal inspection steps dictate, because they know it saves headaches later. So how do we spot these responses and talk about them without placing blame? We use our storytelling method called the 4Ds: dumb, dangerous, difficult, and different. Instead of asking, why did you break the rule? Leaders would ask, what are people responding to that feels dumb, dangerous, difficult, or different? For example, dumb. What are people responding to that feels silly, wasteful, clumsy, or poorly fitted to the actual task? Dangerous. What response increases exposure or reduces our safety margin? Difficult. What are people responding to that makes the official way hard to do every time? Different. What is different between the written process and the responses seen in real work? Imagine a worker dealing with constant machine jams. The official lockout procedure takes far longer than clearing the jam, and the line is under pressure. The worker responds by developing a quicker way. It's a time-saving response. Using the 4Ds, we see the official rule feels difficult to execute dozens of times a shift. It feels dumb compared to the minor jam, and it's different from reality. The ultimate takeaway today is this: responses are evidence. They show how people are making work function under real conditions. They highlight exactly where the system is relying on human flexibility, where the design is lacking, and where pressures are building. If an organization depends heavily on workers making recovery responses or coordination responses just to hold things together, that is a blazing signal that the design of the work needs immediate attention. So if we want to embrace an adaptive workforce, we need to shift our thinking from how do we stop people from adapting to what is the work environment asking people to adapt to. In closing, people's responses are shaped by the conditions of work. If we want better responses, we need better conditions and better work. If you would like to better understand the responses in your work, reach out to us to explore further. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey with Hop Into Action. I've loved sharing stories, ideas, and practical ways to do safety differently with you. Your support and curiosity are what make this community so strong, and I want to thank you for being part of it. If you're ready to keep building capability, capacity, and resilience, I'd encourage you to check out the HOP Beginner's Guide series on Amazon. Each volume is short, practical, and packed with insights, and the book series is designed for busy people who want real impact, not theory. This isn't the end of the conversation, just the next step in your journey. So thank you again for listening, for learning, for supporting better work. Until next time, remember, small changes, shared stories, and thoughtful practice lead to big results with HOP, learning teams, and the 4Ds.